Hey, what's going on, everybody? How you guys doing? Welcome to PODIO Commentary. Tonight, we are going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite movies. A movie that was an absolute flop when it came out. And 41 years ago is when the thing came out. And it flopped hard. But now, here it is all these years later, and it is one of the seminal classics of the 80s. It is one of the top science fiction horror films of all time. And it is a movie that so many have attempted to emulate and have never really succeeded on. And tonight on the show, we're going to be talking about all the behind-the-scenes stuff, going into it, having a great old time. For those of you who are listening to this on the audio podcast, thank you. Welcome to PODIO Commentary. My name is Matt Jarbo, and this is a revamp of the podcast, largely in the form of a live stream, because I want to talk about movies. I want to definitely enjoy them with you guys who are watching at home. And I want to build a community of film lovers who we can just have these conversations about movies that we like, or maybe don't like. We can disagree, we can agree. It's going to be a lot of fun. So after I go through my presentation here, we will open up the lines for a couple people to call in and to have the conversation. So again, this is the PODIO Commentary podcast talking about the John Carpenter classic, The Thing. So for those of you who don't know what this movie is, if you're coming into this blind, even after seeing that trailer, let me give you a rundown. A team of American scientists in Antarctica investigate a nearby Norwegian research station that has been mysteriously destroyed. They discovered the Norwegians had dug something out of the ice, including a bizarre frozen creature. Taking the creature's corpse back to their base, the Americans soon realize that the alien life form can perfectly imitate any living being. The alien breaks free and begins assimilating and imitating members of the team. Paranoia grips the base as no one knows who is still human and who is the Thing in disguise. With the inability to distinguish human from alien, R.J. McCready and the remaining men resort to increasingly desperate measures to survive. In the climactic showdown, McCready battles the Thing in an attempt to stop its escape to the outside world and save humanity. It's a great summary of a great movie. It's a very simple premise. A bunch of dudes out in the middle of nowhere, in this case, a research post in Antarctica, and they come across some crazy stuff. Now, this particular movie was written by Bill Lancaster. If you're not too familiar with who he is, he's actually the son of the late, great Burt Lancaster, except he got into doing writing. He actually wrote The Bad News Bears and The Bad News Bears Go to Japan before working on this movie. Even at one point down the road, he actually wrote an early draft of Back to the Future, but it was rewritten and changed from his original version, but he does still receive credit for the characters and the first draft of that movie. So that's something that I just learned about today, that this guy who wrote one of my favorite movies also wrote the first draft, at least, of another one of my all-time favorite movies. It's pretty great. So The Thing is actually what would be considered a breakthrough screenplay for Bill Lancaster, because it allowed him to take on a bit more of a high-profile project compared to his previous comedic sports films, right? Because, The Bad News Bears and The Bad News Bears in Breaking Training, and there's one where they go to Japan. Those are definitely comedies. Those are definitely like more family-friendly teenage comedies, things like that. But in this specific instance, it allows him to really kind of dive in. And he was chosen for this by producer Scott Cohen, mostly because they liked his work and they really wanted him to stay very close to the original 1930s novella by Who Goes There? And that's what this movie's based on, and that is what the original The Thing from Outer Space is based on, one of Carpenter's favorite movies that actually showed up in the original Halloween. And so, they wanted this guy to write it. And he came on in and he did his job. He liked the concept of what the original novella had. He likes the paranoia. He liked the setting, but he wanted to kind of shrink it down a little bit. He wanted to tighten it up because in the original novella, there's like 40, 50 people at the station, right? At this outpost. And so it's like, there's a lot of death. There's a lot of death, a lot of destruction, a lot of craziness in the original novella. But here he really wanted to just like have it be a core group of guys that just start getting taken out one by one by one. And it worked quite well. So obviously we know this movie was directed by the absolute great and prophetic and amazing and awesome John Carpenter. I could look, I know John Carpenter is well loved amongst fanboys. Like I know that like it's not even something that is that is not known. We all love John Carpenter. But this is one that I feel like he was really in a good space back in the early 80s. You had The Fog, you had Escape from New York. Obviously after this there was Big Trouble in Little China. They Live. I mean, just a bunch of great films having come out of Carpenter around that time. And this one, in my mind, I think kind of like rises to the top of the pile of the films that he has done, albeit my very first John Carpenter movie was Big Trouble in Little China when I saw it back on VHS all the way back in like the late 80s when I was first visiting California. I mean, obviously, you know, Carpenter's films, they're very simple. If you think about it, there's like a minimalist style that builds suspense and atmosphere through tension rather than just outright gore. Now, he does go to gore in The Thing, but think about Halloween for a second, right? Halloween has the opening, young Michael wearing the mask, going through the house, everything else like this, getting the knife, killing his sister. It's a frightening, haunting opening to a movie. And then of course throughout the rest of the film we know Michael kills people, but he stalks them at first and he builds the tension and builds the tension and builds the tension. Here they do a lot of that as well, and I felt it was like a really interesting kind of character piece up until a lot of the gore starts going. You get to that last like act of the film when everything kind of falls apart, but I just enjoyed the character interactions and I feel like that was a really good use of this ensemble cast, right? So when he was kind of told about working on this, or when it was brought to his attention, he actually didn't want to do it. He felt that the original 1951 film was a classic and would be too difficult to top. But after he went back and reread the novella, Who Goes There, he actually found himself excited and he wanted to do it. So to prepare for this one, he actually watched the original by Howard Hawks multiple times, but didn't want to do a 1-by-1 or a 1-to-1 recreation. He really wanted to do something that was going to be truer to the source material's themes and something downright frightening. Now, obviously, his direction focused primarily on escalating the mystery and the suspension tension, as I mentioned, but he also chose to keep the creature largely obscured to generate a greater sense of unease, obviously, until we get to the Norris scene in with the autopsy. I mean, that shit's still wild. It still creeps me out to this day. Now, The Thing is often referred to as one of Carpenter's greatest films, and I think it has like really good reason for it. It just created this atmosphere that is almost infinitely rewatchable. It still has a great way of making the hairs on your neck rise up, giving you a little bit of that unease, and dealing with something that is so foreign and alien by, you know, in reality, is really interesting to like just kind of watch everyone react to it because quite frankly, they didn't know what to do. And I think a lot of that was really kind of added on to by Kurt Russell, who, you know, he wasn't actually even the first choice for the role. They wanted people like Jeff Bridges, Nick Nolte, Sam Shepard, and Chris Christopherson to play MacReady. They'd actually reached out to all of those guys, but none of those deals actually worked out. And that kind of goes back to the whole thing about like Tom Selleck. If Tom Selleck would have been Indiana Jones over Harrison Ford, you know, we look back on it now 40 years later and we're like, man, nobody else could have played Indiana Jones. I mean, but Tom Selleck would have probably done a really good job. But then we look at like, let's say Kurt Russell as not only Snake Plissken, but R.J. MacReady and Jack Burton and these iconic characters that he created with, you know, John Carpenter. And it becomes this idea that I don't think anybody else could have really played R.J. MacReady. Because at the last line of the movie, when he kills the Thing, he goes, yeah, fuck you too. right? And just the way he says it, the condemnation, the anger, the frustration, just it's definitely meant to be one of those like cool, like last minute, right before you kill the bad guy quips sort of thing. Maybe something like Shane Black would have popularized years later. But really, in this case, what I liked about it just is it worked. It just worked in the moment, right? Because here's this gigantic brah, monster, this brah, and it's this all these creatures, all of these things that it had assimilated over the span of its life. And here he is just going, yeah, fuck you too. Total setup for Jack Burton, in my particular opinion. I mean, obviously, even at this particular point in time, Russell was intimately familiar with Carpenter. They had worked together on the television movie Elvis, which was their first time teaming up. And then obviously, they had done 1981's Escape from New York, which I still think is just such a fantastic movie. And this was their third outing together, which largely, in my opinion, was probably their best collaboration. And it also shows you that they have really good collaborative spirits. Like, I would love to see them even now, all these years later, want to come back and actually really, do something else, right? End of their career sort of thing. But when we talk about Carpenter, Kurt Russell actually found out about it. And apparently he had told his agent, reach out to Carpenter and let him know about it. And that was, he was like, I want to do this, but it took a little bit of time. And then he finally got into it because he read the script and was immediately enthused by the character of MacReady. He was drawn to playing an anti-hero type in a gritty, intense monster movie because the character of Snake Plissken and the character of R.J. MacReady, somewhat of the same vein, right? Somewhat of the same vein. If you really put them side by side, they're kind of cut from the same cloth. Their DNA is very similar. And I think that was worked out because instead of, being a one-eyed, mercenary type guy being sent into the walled off prison city of Manhattan, now he's stuck in the Antarctic at an outpost station for a research facility, which, by the way, did you guys ever realize we never found out what it was they were up there researching? We have no idea what anyone was up there doing. They were just a research outpost. And that was it. Only one of the guys there was a geologist, really. And that was about it. We have no idea why they were there. That wasn't even part of the story. And I thought that was really interesting because it almost doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't really have to be at all. But going back to Kurt Russell here, one of the things that was a little bit tough for Universal in the beginning was his salary demands, which because he was now an established actor, an established star, he is an actor, if you will. He wanted a lot of money, and they agreed to pay him $400,000 for the role, which was a lot of money back in the early 80s. And, he actually did a great job. He was completely excited by the challenge of filming in harsh conditions where he had to work for 12 plus hour days and, quite frankly, sub-zero temperatures up there in British Columbia, as well as some elements of Juneau, Alaska. So with him on board, we can now talk about the writing of the movie, getting in before the filming here, because even before Carpenter came on board as a director, the film went through multiple writers. There's an early draft by William F. Nolan and others that differed very significantly from the source material and the original concept. And then, of course, once Carpenter came on, he brought on Bill Lancaster. And then, again, as I kind of mentioned, Lancaster had wanted to do something that was similar but different. He didn't want to just do a remake. And his vision was largely aligned with Carpenter's. And that really works out. You guys can see when you've got the writer and you've got the director and they're on the same page there, it really works out. He actually ended up writing the script over several months. And he had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out the second act. And if you watch the movie, and I would hope you'd watch the movie recently, the second act does have a little bit of hiccups, right? And I did notice that a little bit, where it's just kind of like they do the setup, the thing is now in the base, and then it just kind of it just starts to go in a direction that is great, but it doesn't really have what I would argue would be a traditional second act. It works, but they probably could have done some more things with it to maybe flesh it out a little bit more, to maybe create a little bit more suspense, but it also kind of comes in at a quick, like 98 minutes, which is great for a movie of its size. As much as I would like more story and more world building, maybe some more at the Norwegians or whatever, largely I'm very happy with what we have, because when we do a movie like this, you do want to get in and get out and leave the audience wanting more. And for me, I really do want, surprisingly, more of the world building. One of the things I did agree with Lancaster on was that keeping the creature mostly invisible until later on. But this was a little bit of a conflict with Rob Bottin. And Rob Bottin did the visual effects for the movie, and a great job with that one there. And I'll talk about him here in a little bit, but like, he wanted there to be more of the alien because that's what he was into. He was really into creatures. He wanted to do it. And I totally get that, but it's very much a fine balance that you have to look at here in regards to all that. So once they got everything all done, right? Once they got past all the false starts and they got the script written and it was faithful enough to the source material and they figured out what they wanted to do, they got Universal to sign off on it and they went out to go and shoot the movie. And they started shooting the movie a year before its release, or they started, I want to say, pre-production on the movie a year before its release. Summer of 1981, producer Stuart Cohen and John Carpenter spent months scouting isolated locations in Alaska, in Canada, and they found some like glaciers in Iceland that they liked for the snowy settings, but they opted to shoot on the North America. I think it was Canada and Alaska versus shooting in Iceland. And it was then in June of 1981 that Rob Bottin began designing and creating the film's complex creature effects in Los Angeles. And he started so early because it would take him almost up to the premiere of the movie to even get everything done. He was still tweaking stuff as long as he possibly could. So then in August of 81, the principal cast, they all flew out to Juneau, Alaska for the first leg of the Alaskan shoot. And this was like largely the initial outdoor scenes at the Norwegian camp, the helicopter chase, and they were filming that in late August of 1981. But then it started to get a little bit colder and the temperature started dropping to freezing overnight around like -20 Fahrenheit. And this caused the film equipment to start to freeze and break. There was even times in the movie where Kurt Russell is in a helicopter and he had to fly without gloves. And because of this, his hands would become frostbitten within seconds. So here you've got this like up and coming big Hollywood star, and he's like really putting in the work for this little like horror film, so to speak. The Norwegian camp had to be built months in advance on location for enough snow to accumulate on the rooftops and fully cover the buildings, making it look abandoned, which is really cool because nowadays I think they would largely treat it, if I'm being honest with you, they would largely treat it like you're watching a Hallmark movie where they just use fake snow and they use fake effects and they would just like make it look all kind of like, oh, it's a little bit of snow and then we're just going to digital everything. And nah, I mean, this is the 80s. You have to run hard and run fast. You know what I'm saying? And that definitely made it a very, again, it added a lot of realism to everything. And I really liked that quite a bit there. So then also Carpenter and the crew were also rushing to get as many shots done before the weather shifted. They only had a few opportunities to film some of the sequences before conditions became too dangerous. The makeup artists on set had to constantly warm the actors' faces and then reapply the makeup in between takes because it would freeze to their skin. Their eyelashes also had to be thawed. And now that I know that information, and I'm thinking about it in regards to watching the movie in 4K, you can kind of see some moments where some of the makeup doesn't necessarily look like the greatest. And now you know why. They kept having to reapply it and it kept like freezing to them. So, I mean, there's a ton of hazards. There was like a mountain road, a one-way up mountain road to get to the top of the glacier where they built the exteriors for the base camp. And the crew nearly like slid off the mountain road on the way to the location, as well as always having to deal with very treacherous environments and frostbite. But this is where actors will be like, but I did it for my craft. I did it for the experience, because the extreme cold did really add to the authenticity of the actor's performance. Their breath was visible, and icy costumes conveyed the Antarctic conditions perfectly on camera in a way that sets simply couldn't. And that is true. I was watching it and it did look cold. The movie looked cold. They obviously, like, they didn't, shoot it on a soundstage. Well, they did. The interiors were shot on a soundstage. But other than that, they were really outside doing this. Then after the Alaska stuff, they moved to Stewart, British Columbia, which is where they had the main location for the rest of the shoot. They started shooting at an abandoned mining facility, and the interior sets were filmed on a soundstage after that. Kurt Russell and other cast members had to adjust to the frigid indoor temperatures because of the 12-hour shoot. They kind of moved on from the Stewart location at the November 1981. This is where they had the full base. And so they really blew that up with dynamite. I was watching the movie again, and I couldn't tell if they destroyed the exterior of the base with dynamite or if that was a miniature. And it might just be like the quality of the 4K transfer, because I really honestly thought that it was a miniature to like save on money. No, and it turns out they actually just hucked a shit ton of dynamite at it and went kablooey. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. And then after that, they shot from December 1981 to February 1982 down in Los Angeles. This was for additional scenes, reshoots, and interior shots to for the base and everything else. And it was here that Rob Bottin continued to refine the creatures' designs and effects as they were filming them, right? He was really working on it, right? And I want to talk about some of the stuff he did for this, okay? Because I feel like the unsung hero of this movie is the creature effects. And a lot of that has to do with Rob Bottin, obviously, and Stan Winston. But here, Rob Bottin and his team worked for over a year designing and creating the alien creature. They worked well into their LA filming portion. They operated extremely complex mechanical rigs and contraptions custom built to animate different creature components and achieve unsettling transformations on screen, because it was very freaky. Like, for example, the scene where Palmer's thing's head stretches and distorts, Bottin's team built an elaborate robotic skull with parts that could elongate. Motors and operators off camera controlled the movements. And that was the thing. I mean, sure, there was puppetry work, there was mechanical work that went into this. But like, even looking at it now, 40 years old, and you can see some of like the details, you can see some of like the fakeness of it. It doesn't take away from how creepy that damn thing looks. It doesn't take away at all from how creepy the movie is, in just regard to like the shot of Norris's head turning into the spider is still not freaky. You know what I mean? Like, I was waiting for that. I was going to get weirded out by that, but it was really good. Additionally, Bottin handled a multitude of animatronic effects like the fleshy Venus flytrap inspired dog thing and the multifaceted Blair thing. Custom tentacles and appendages were also created. Extensive puppeteering brought the smaller assimilated creatures to life. Bottin cited the kitchen assimilation scene involving the crab-like being as one of his proudest accomplishments. I mean, really, it was. The spider, like, I know, like, Norris's head coming out of the body and everything else was like definitely freaky. That's the frightening shot. But when the head detaches and then uses the tongue to like attach to the desk and then go over to the desk and then grow out the spider legs to be able, and then the eyes to be able to move, it's still just like, I still hate spiders as a result of that, by the way. I really hate that. But when I mentioned before that like Bottin was like really working up on this like to the end, it was even up to just 2 weeks before the premiere. He was pushing himself to continually top his own difficult achievements through the lengthy post-production process of this movie. And because you got to remember, like, this guy was like a really big fan of John Carpenter, and he really wanted to prove himself. He was also 22 years old at the time. This kid, like, didn't really do much. You know what I mean? Like, he came on board and then he was just kind of given this job, this dream job of working on a John Carpenter movie from Universal, working with the storyboard designer to get the shots looking just right, to convey all the gore and the craziness and the stuff that we really, really, really remember him for. We really, really, really remember this stuff. And that's why it's great. So let's talk quickly about the budget, because the thing had a very turbulent budgetary history. All right. So originally in 1980, Universal had allocated $10 million for the budget and only $200,000 for creature effects. But then as the scale of the film increased significantly during development, the projected costs rose to over $17 million, which was an unprecedented amount for a horror movie at the time. I mean, didn't Halloween, the original, cost Carpenter like less than $1 million or something, right? I mean, and then even like Escape from New York had like a smaller budget. The producers were able to get the budget down to $15 million to get Universal to approve it, but that did not include anything like set construction and overpay time. When Rob Bottin joined, it became clear that the creature effects alone were going to require about $750,000, so damn near 4 times the amount that they had originally allocated. But hey, listen, all of it went on screen, and that is part of the immortalness of the movie. There were various screen scenes that were scrapped or simplified, including a $1.5 million set piece for Benning's assimilation that was considered too expensive. And I'm okay with that, because Benning's death was cool. I like that. He's out in the cold. He's, they torch him. I think it just kind of works. It's more minimalistic. The final production budget came out to being about $12.4 million, but with all indirect costs and overhead, the budget then kind of rounded out to roughly about $15 million. And again, that was pretty high for 1982 for the type of movie that it was. And even though it did it didn't do very well, like off the bat, I would argue at this point that largely they've made money on it, but really back then, not so well for Universal. But finally, when Carpenter got all the editing and post-production done, the film came out on June 25th, 1982. And you know what, man, before I even dive into the movie itself, that weekend was insane. That I got to talk about that weekend, because that weekend was nuts. All right. So the movie opened at number 8, but you know what was number 1? E.T. Number 2, Poltergeist. Number 3, Rocky 3. Number 4, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. You had Annie, right? Open a week before. Bambi was number 10 that weekend. The Sword and the Sorcerer, so another Disney movie, was also out. That was number 11. Number 12 at the time, I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but number 12 at the time was Porky's. Porky's was number 12 that had just been bumped out of the top 10. But the one that opened alongside it, and I know most of you, if you are fans of the thing, if you are Things aficionado, you know which movie I left out. You know which movie opened at number 7 for that specific event. Blade Runner. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner opened also June 25th, 1982. Both Blade Runner and The Thing opened on the same day. And I don't know about you, but that to me is definitely just like a wild, crazy conspiracy. It's such a wild happenstance, in my opinion. When I was watching The Thing again, I kept thinking about like how awesome the overall movie was, how awesome the setup was, how awesome like the locations were. It was, it opens with the helicopter chasing after a dog. Like, you don't know what's going on. I mean, obviously at this point you do, but none of the people involved at the base, they don't know. They just know there's a helicopter taking shots at a wolf dog. The Norwegians land, they try to assault the dog. They shoot Benning in the leg. And then, the one guy, the base leader, pulls out his 6-shooter, shoots the Norwegian right in the face. The Norwegian's dead. Other Norwegian blows himself up. Dog survives. It's such a weird opening to a movie because it doesn't have any kind of real backstory to it. There's no real kind of setup outside of just the opening shot of the alien spacecraft landing. or crashing onto Earth, obviously 20 some million years prior. And so, you're watching it and you just kind of think about that and you're like, yeah, these guys have no idea what's going on. They're up there doing some research. But as we start kind of spending a little bit of time with the cast, with the characters, you start to realize there's a dynamic there. Obviously, MacReady is respected, but he's an outsider, right? He's that anti-hero type guy. You've got Wilford Brimley as Blair, the biologist. There's Knowles, the cook. Palmer, the assistant mechanic. Of course, Keith Davids as Childs, who is kind of like the primary antagonist to MacReady, right? He's very untrusting of MacReady. They had to have that dynamic in order for, I think, parts of the movie to work, especially the ending. You've got like Benning, the meteorologist. You got Clark, the dog handler, played by Richard Masur, who did a really great job on that one. You got Fuchs, the assistant biologist. Gary is the station commander, and then of course you got Windows, who's the radio operator, and everyone has their own job. Even though the movie itself doesn't necessarily explain what every one of those jobs are, you get the idea that everyone has their own job, right? Knowles is obviously the cook. Okay, you've got Windows, and he's the operator. We all know he's the operator, right? MacReady, again, on the outskirts. Don't quite know, but everyone looks to him as to be like the go-to guy. He's the helicopter pilot, but also kind of, I think, like almost like a security force kind of guy, to be fair. And so when him and Dr. Copper decide to head off and go check out the Norwegian base and find everything there, like obviously that's a great reveal. That's a great setup, especially when they come across the alien spacecraft. Because again, what's funny is about this is like it almost didn't surprise them when they find the alien spacecraft. They were just kind of like, oh, okay, all right. And then of course they find the cutout section with the alien creature that was clearly in it that they had taken back to the base and thawed out. And there wasn't really like a lot of like, this is an alien spaceship. This thing was underneath the ground. We clearly came across something creepy. There wasn't like anything like really about that. It was just kind of like, a circumstance situation here. Like, all right, cool. Like we've come across this, which makes me wonder then, in this specific world, in this entire environment, did they at any point in time, were aliens even a thing? Right? I mean, like something along those lines. If it didn't freak him out, if this gigantic crash spacecraft with like an open hatch, and they find, what they believe to be like the frozen, the where the grave was largely that the Norwegians took, and I guess the 2011 The Thing explains some of that, but I've actually never watched it, so I need to watch it and then talk about it. But I just kind of thought that was a little interesting. But of course, they get back to the base, and then here starts setting in the paranoia. And then, there's an old 2002 video game on the PlayStation, Xbox, and PC called The Thing, because everything in regards to this franchise is all just called one thing. But most of us know exactly what we're talking about. And like that game sets up a sequel to this movie. And again, deals with like the isolation and paranoia and dealing with this creature. And I remember playing the game 20 years ago when it came out and loving it, and also loving the movie. And so I always felt like when they start getting into the paranoia, when they start getting into the mistrust, that was always something that was really cool, especially when Blair figures out that this thing can replicate itself, and he starts realizing, like he realizes that there's no coming back from this. Like he realizes in that moment when he goes kind of crazy that they have to stay there. They can't call for rescue. They can't call for help. Shit is going to get real, especially the whole thing with the dogs, which like you could totally tell that stuff is still wild, and you can really see Clark's response to this, because they're building up Clark at this point to be the Thing, which I thought was a really awesome little kind of twist later on. But as you're watching it, I know they're trying to set up that Clark is the Thing. They're trying to establish that the dog is the Thing. He goes into a room. We don't know whose room it is. Looking at the silhouette of the guy, it looks like Norris, but at the same time, like it could be Palmer. And I think even the actor, or it was like a stagehand or somebody who played that specific silhouette, looked like It looked ominous on purpose, But even then, we have to ask ourselves, was it Palmer or was it Norris? Which one was it? It was definitely Norris. I think it was definitely Norris, but it could be whomever. We simply just don't know. And but it was so good at how they started to just kind of get picked off one by one. And it was the one that got me the most on that though was Fuchs, because Fuchs goes out there and clearly Fuchs trusts MacReady, right? He's trusting him with this information. He's suggesting that, they should eat canned food only, not share anything, because if one molecule from this creature gets into you, it's done. It's over. It can assimilate you, and he's really trying to do that. But then he goes outside and he sees that somebody had left MacReady's jacket torn apart as if he had been assimilated. And I mean, it was a good twist. It was a good, deflection. But then the dude just basically takes out a flare and burns himself. And I really had to think about that afterward, because his death in the movie is one that doesn't make the most amount of sense. I think that one's kind of the one that maybe fell apart the most, only because when you think about it, Fuchs there was no indication of the fear pushing him to suicide. But it does make sense logically for one person in the group to be suicidal. But because this movie largely plays on misdirection, it largely plays on what you can't see, and then seeing the rest of the characters react to that was good, because obviously at this point then they find Fuchs as Knowles and MacReady, and then, they see that someone has been in the shack, but then the next shot is, again, it cuts around it, and Knowles believes that MacReady is the bad guy, right? And that was such I get it, but it also kind of felt a little forced and whatnot. But what was great about that was MacReady at this point now just he doesn't trust anybody. And this is where we start getting into the whole blood test thing, which is still one of the coolest scenes ever. But what I really liked about that though was everyone's trying to get at MacReady. He's clearly frostbitten. He's clearly tired. He's paranoid. He's agitated, and he's threatening to blow everybody up and whatever. And then you've got Clark, who just we as the audience were kind of meant to believe that Clark was definitely assimilated. And then Clark grabs the scalpel and tries making a run at MacReady, who just pop, one shot to the head, drops Clark. And then his body just nothing happens. And then they test the blood and he's human. And to me, I was holy shit. If it was me, if I was in the situation, I'd be oh my God, I just killed this guy I know. There was almost no reaction from anybody. Oh my God, you killed. There's no reaction to that. And what cracked me up about that was yeah, it's probably just the adrenaline, right? It's probably just the adrenaline kicking off at that moment in time. Everyone is oh my God, how can this be? He's dead, but was he human? Was he not human? But we still have to solve the rest of this mystery. Who else is still going to be human? And then of course, when it gets to Palmer and they test his blood and that whole thing goes up, man. Oh my God. That was so crazy, because he just straight up kills Windows and then just bursts through the wall with super mega, strength and stuff while on fire, and then just collapses outside. It's just some great stuff. Even if it's kind of largely unbelievable, he just goes through the wall. But now you're down 2 more guys, and all you even got left really at that point is you've just got, you got Gary, you got Childs, you've got Knowles, and you've got MacReady. And then there's Blair. But is he human? Is he not? We don't quite know. They obviously want us to believe that he is. There's even a weird, oddly enough, there was a noose in the tool shed where Blair was at. And they don't ever explain why there was a noose, but Wilford Brimley just gets really kind of into it. But what was great about that was he was able to escape and start building this alien spacecraft. And again, they come across this spacecraft and they blow it up. But what's so funny about that too is they're not oh my God, it's an alien spacecraft. He's looking to get the hell off the planet. Maybe we should let him, you know what I mean? Or whatever. It was just, all right, let's blow it up, but there's no way of getting back. And they know that they're going to die. And they come to that realization really quick. There was not a lot of dawdling on that. There wasn't a lot of fighting back on that one. There was just well, the helicopter's been disabled. The tractor's been disabled. The generator's been disabled. There's not a lot of heat. Let's warm this place up by blowing the place to shit And then we're just going to go out and we're just going to fight this thing and we're going to go from there. And like, it's a very simple plan with really only one outcome, either kill it or die trying. And then if you kill it, you're going to die anyway. You know, and obviously, again, at this point in time, we know Blair is one, but we also are led to believe that Childs is one because he's largely not around for the ending of it. They go down into the underground, you know, by the generator to set everything up. We see Gary get killed, you know, by Blair, and then Knowles just like kind of walks off and like they set it up, but then Knowles dies as well. But we never see Knowles die. He just gets killed off screen, which again is I understand that from like a directorial perspective, but it's almost like at the end there is like there was nothing, no screams, no blood, no violence, no whatever. And then all of a sudden here comes a creature from, you know, burrowing under the ground and blowing up, and like all the other creatures it was, you see the dog come out, you know, and it destroys the detonator. And then that's the whole like, yeah, fuck you too. And he throws it, blows it up. It takes out the base, right? Great stuff. Then we get to the final shot of the film. And I love the final shot of the film. I love the final scene of the movie. It's so ambiguous. It's so open for debate. So you got MacReady. Okay. And MacReady is drinking a bottle of Jim Beam. And he's walking around with it. Now, a couple questions with that. One is where to get the bottle from, right? Because we know he's a drinker. We know he drinks. But we also see him making Molotov cocktails previously with those bottles. So was this a new bottle or was this one of those other bottles? We don't know. But then here comes Childs, who is now alive, right? And they're very distrusting of one another. And obviously they're waiting there at the very end to die or to see what happens next. And uneasily, right, MacReady gives him the bottle of booze and he takes a drink. Basically, there's this whole thing online where Childs doesn't have any breath, doesn't have his breath being shown. And people believe that that's the thing. But then Childs' line of dialogue there says that the base is, you know, all the fire has heated the base up real nice and that it won't last forever. So that leads me to believe that in this specific situation, like there wouldn't be breath because he would be next to a fire there. You wouldn't see his breath at all. So that's kind of a thing. But then other people have speculated that MacReady in the bottle of Jim Beam was really gasoline, and he took a shot of that and gave it to Childs, who was then, you know, like he took a drink not knowing because he's not human. But the thing is supposed to also assimilate all of your personality traits and your memories. So I would assume it would also assimilate your taste buds and your memory of what alcohol tastes like. So I don't know how much of that I believe, but it's a very kind of open-ended thing. You don't know where it's at. You don't know what's going to happen. And that is just where things go at the end of the movie. We don't know. It's cuts to black. Very similar even to like Escape from LA. At the end of Escape from LA, Snake Plissken kind of looks over and there's somebody there. We don't know what it is. We don't know who it is. There is speculation that even at the end of that movie, that he is an alien, right? That he's seeing an alien that sets up Escape from Planet Earth. That's a theory I saw floating around. But what I believe is like, you know, based upon the sequel, the game, that they come across Child's body. So Childs dies, but MacReady lives. I think even in the comic book that followed, MacReady lives, Child dies. And then MacReady tracks the thing like across the world. So there's a lot to the story that can be explored. There's a lot of world building that's there. But I just really, really enjoyed what the movie did in that time frame and really enjoyed what it was able to put together. And sadly, it didn't do as well, critically speaking. It got a lot of negative reviews. Roger Ebert called it depressing and hopeless. Other critics called it too bleak, nihilistic, graphically violent, and lacking in character development. I don't know, whatever. Everyone has their own assigned duties in the story. You don't really need all the character development when you know they're just going to get picked off, but you also understand what it is they're doing. I don't know. The New York Times called it foolish, depressing, and overproduced. But years later, it gained far more favorable coverage. It's a movie I've loved out of the multiple times I've seen it. It's now considered, like I said, an influential classic and one of Carpenter's best films. But the movie, it didn't even do very well at the box office. Opening number 8, right up against E.T., Blade Runner, all the other movies. It only did 3.1 million its opening weekend, grand total of 19.6 million at the end of the box office run. So definitely not profitable. But at the time, again, the thing faced the competition of E.T., E.T. being a hopeful movie about aliens, right? E.T. Phone Home is like, oh yeah, no, that's good. Kids love that movie, right? This is more of like a hopeless, everyone dies at the end sort of thing. It was bleak in its nature. But horror films at the time were not considered big box office hits. And it was kind of weird because even at the time it was called out as being surprising because of Carpenter's track record after Halloween and Escape from New York. But like I said, it wasn't necessarily like the biggest bomb of all time for Universal, but it was considered an underperforming disappointment. Even if now, 41 years later, we look back on it with a lot of love and a lot of joy. And, I still need to watch the 2011 movie, but I really also feel like it is going to be something that's great. And it is what it is. So obviously at this point now, I want to bring on people who want to call on in. First up is Mo. Hey, Mo, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Thanks for tuning in tonight. So what are your thoughts on the thing?
Well, I have very foggy memories of the original thing, the one from the 80s. But I remember watching it as a kid. But it's the one from 2011 is the one I recently saw again, and
Well, I know the
oh
one
my,
from 2011 is currently on Netflix. I know that's currently on Netflix.
yeah, I
I,
think it is.
and I need to give it a watch. But when it comes to this movie, like, how old are you when you first saw it?
Uh, 8
Okay, so
when
you're
I
8 years
saw
old.
that.
That's got to be pretty frightening for an 8-year-old.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not as frightening as a living doll, but yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, it's like so.
Uh,
I recently got it on 4K. No, I got it on 4K last year, but I recently got a 4K player, and I've been trying to watch it. And like my 5-year-old keeps bugging me every time I try to watch it, and she's like, "I'll just watch it with you," and I'm like, "No, you can't watch this movie with me." But then I'm
I'll
watching
let
it
her
again.
watch it.
Well, no, I'm not going to let her watch it. I want her to be able to sleep. But it's like I'm also watching it again, and I'm like, would this be too tame for a 5-year-old in modern times? And I don't think it would, but she also wouldn't understand. Like, she would be bored to tears by the first 2/3 of the movie.
Yeah, I figured.
You
Yeah, the
know,
2011 one is, in my opinion, is a pretty good movie, but totally unnecessary.
well, I mean, a lot of times sequels are unnecessary, but I feel like when you have an IP that's as popular as the thing, I'm really surprised that they haven't been able to do more with it. You know what I mean? Like
That's
I mean,
yeah, that's true.
obviously, I agree with Ralph in the chat there that the thing doesn't really work in any other environment outside of Antarctica, which is true because of just like the whole idea of it freezing and then that slowing it down, so on and so forth. But they could find a way to like imagine this, right? Imagine they do the thing in an urban setting. But what they do is it's like it's a hive mind, right? We could argue that it's a hive mind.
Hmm.
So they have to track it back to the original form to kill it. But would that actually kill it? I mean, that's the other question as well. If they killed the original, would it still die? I mean, like there's so like how did it learn to like pilot a spacecraft? Why is this spacecraft looking like an old saucer from the 1950s? This thing
You know
crash
what
landed 20 million
you
years
know what
prior.
you described right now is the first part of it is basically the faculty.
It is. I mean, Invasion of the Body Snatchers is what the faculty is pulling from. And I love the faculty. It's a great take on that. There's
John
even one.
Stewart.
Oh yeah, and that was great. Bebe Neuwirth. I mean, like Robert Patrick. Is a lot of good character actors that are in the faculty. But even then, a couple years prior to the faculty, there was the Gabriel Anwar Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and that was a remake of the original. And that was a
Wasn't there
good.
another remake after that?
They did Invasion in 2007 with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman, which
I fell asleep through that movie.
I like. Well, because they actually reshot like the ending of that movie, and they got I forget the director. I think they got the director who did V for Vendetta to come and shoot the action scenes for like, because they needed, it was produced by Joel Silver and it didn't have action, but that's a whole other conversation to have. But I'm gonna let you go, Mo. I got another guy to get to here, and but I appreciate you calling on in, man. Thank you.
No problem. Have a good night.
Have a good one. Thank you, buddy. All right, joining us is William. William, what are your thoughts on The Thing?
The Thing is the greatest science fiction horror movie ever made. I saw this in the theater. I have screened this at my own theater at the center at least 50 or 60 times over the last 25 or 30 years. I did a drive-in where we set up a drive-in, and somewhere I have the video of the blood scene, because every time I show this to people for the very first time, I want to see their reaction to the blood scene and see people jump, because it'll never be the first time for me again. But for them, seeing people jump when that blood scene happens is still a thrill that I get. It's one of the last few movies where it was dominated by practical effects almost entirely, reverse cameragraphy, all kinds of things that were innovative in that movie. But it was also a bad time for it to come out. I think I saw 3 movies that weekend with my dad. If I can remember correctly, Blade Runner was released around then.
Yeah,
as well.
Blade Runner opened the same day.
Yeah, I remember seeing Blade Runner on a Sunday, and I saw The Thing on a Saturday night with the old man. And this was at Crenshaw Plaza in LA. So I saw it in the theaters, because that's what we did back then. But yeah, this movie is so influential in so many ways. You have the 1951 version and the 1982 version. They're both essentially Cold War era movies, and about the distrust. Could you trust your fellow man? Because in the 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, you had a lot of spy things going on, Red Scare, a lot of espionage things, and we were right in the height of the Cold War. And the xenophobia is what this movie gets a lot of its mileage on, not being able to trust anybody. I don't think that either man at the end is a thing. I think that if one of them was one of the aliens, there's nothing stopping that person from devouring the other. So that's what I've always thought about it. And as far as its true form, they've always speculated. There's an excellent website called outpost31.com, their Q&A. They've always speculated where the thing came from, if it was made or created, and it assimilated. When it crashes at the beginning of that movie, that's because it's assimilated whatever was piloting that. That's how it knew how to build that ship. But as far as I know, killing one of the things won't destroy. It's designed literally to avoid that. So even if you killed a big thing, or they would still survive. That's why when Palmer's head, or whatever, I forgot the one
Norris.
head.
It was Norris.
Norris's head, it separated itself. And even Palmer, who is a thing at that time, turns around and acknowledges that another one of his own is there and causes it to be killed. So they pretty much have a dog-eat-dog mentality about them. So that's where I've studied this movie for 40 years. It's kind of sad, but I have.
Well, it's a great movie. I mean, I was excited to talk about it because I just think it's fantastic.
There needs to be a third one. Kurt Russell's immortal. Keith David is still doing Navy commercials. There needs to be a third one. They can do it with those guys. This first one, I think it got heavily panned, or 2011 one got heavily panned. It is actually a really good movie. And if you made a third one, I think that would complete a very, very good trilogy. It got kind of crushed when it first came out. There's a lot of CGI in it, but I don't think practical effects would work in 2011. People won't buy them. Now, I don't think if you made another Thing movie, you could do practical effects for the most part. You could probably do 50-50, but it would still be a modern era movie,
Yeah, I mean, well, look at like Evil Dead Rise, for example. That had a $19 million budget, did a lot of practical stuff, also some CG work, but it was convincing. A lot of body horror, things like that. And and I think Evil Dead Rise is a great movie. So I get your point on that one. I would love to see them continue the story. Like I said, there's some comic books out there. You can find, I think it's a YouTuber named Acid Glow that does, maybe I'm thinking the wrong guy. But he does,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I've watched his videos breaking down the Thing comic books and whatnot, and they were pretty interesting. But
There's a video game. There's a video game too. There's a video game that does an excellent job at that as well.
Well, that's almost like the sequel. That's almost a sequel. And that one, actually, just a few months ago, I was actually watching a playthrough of that at night before going to bed. I was like, I want to watch the old Thing, like the old video game playthrough of it, because I would love to see them remake it. And I don't know if Universal would ever invest the money into doing something with the Thing to make it bigger, but like, I think there's enough love out there if they gave it a mid-sized budget and they really worked and tried to make it, like small and isolating and, paranoia laden and everything else. It could be a really fascinating social experiment sort of thing, or like whatever they want to do with it. But I also don't really want them to, only because it's like, not that it would tarnish the legacy of the original, but it's like, where do you take it? That seems like it's going to be a natural extension.
I would go, as long as Jason Blum and John Carpenter are still on the planet. I think there's an opportunity to not only do it, but do it for a decent price, to where you wouldn't, you could, because those, that particular pair has been known for making movies to a point where they can get the most return on their investment. And remember, the biggest fear about the Thing, the one thing that they were all willing to die for, as far as, is to keep that thing where it was, because they knew, even Blair knew. And by the way, that news was Blair thought he could realize when he was going to turn. And at that point, just like Fuchs, they were going to kill themselves, but he just never got the chance.
Oh, okay.
But when it comes to the next step, what they feared in the 1982 movie would come to fruition. What if this thing got to even a small town, on the continent or anything like that? It doesn't have to be L.A. It doesn't have to go full. You could get to Alaska, Barrow, Alaska, or something like that. Just a place where there was more than 6 or 7 people, and then the threat beyond that. But as long as John Carpenter is still breathing, knock on wood, and Blumhouse Production, Universal, that I think they've worked together before, I would think that this is something that has a more than 60% chance of happening. Not. But,
they did say, I did look it up recently, and apparently as of like May of this year, because one thing I didn't mention was the original manuscript had an additional find. An extra like 45 pages, I think, of the original manuscript. It was called Frozen Hell, is what it was named when they released it. And it largely didn't add anything. Like it wasn't groundbreaking. It was there, but it wasn't groundbreaking. And then, but Blumhouse optioned Frozen Hell, and that's what they were going to work on. But according to Carpenter, just recently, he had said something along the lines of like, whatever's coming is going to ultimately be a sequel to his movie. And I'm like, look, like, out of everything Universal has done, they just did the Halloween movies, which I enjoyed. Like everything else is like, if you don't tease me on the Thing, give me the fucking thing, give me the movie.
Yeah. Before he's getting up there too. Like I said, I enjoyed the Halloween. The very first one I thought was complete art. The last two of this recent trilogy made me want to vomit in my mouth. Especially the end of Halloween Kills. We promoted that movie and throwing out T-shirts to people, and then I left. I mean, I wanted to get out of there because that movie was dreadful. But like I said, John Carpenter, he still has it. He's still making movies. I hope they do a direct sequel to The Thing, because I think that just having that answer. I know it's been great that it's been 40 years of ambiguity, but at the same time, you still have it in you to make something. I think a third one to that could be epic. So I hope he gets it done. But hey, thanks for having me on, man. This is my first time on your PODIO commentary.
Yeah. I'm going to do these a lot more often. So it's as an aside to doing the Hollywood After Dark, and then coming over here and talking about a movie for a while.
Yeah, breaking down movies. There's nothing cathartic than that. So keep it up. And like I said, I just subscribed to it, so I will be a normal listener.
All right. Thanks a lot, William. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good one, buddy. All right. I think that's going to wind it down for the night. Keep it at a solid hour. Good run. Thank you guys so much in the chat for listening. I know we had, a few people here for the first time out. That's great. I want to do more of these, obviously, as a way to build up just a positive experience. So I'm going to try to do these as often as I can. I don't mind breaking them down and having them be a thing. I can easily research them, but I appreciate everyone out there. If you guys want to suggest a movie to break down, we can do that in the comment section. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you again. Have yourself a great night, and peace out.